we looking at how interested is the traditional investment space interested in blockchain and crypto-related companies. They don't really understand it in many cases, but the guys that do are actually really interested to have exposure. Security token market is of interest to them because it's something they understand better and they can value, unlike most cryptocurrencies where the market today is still trying to find its feet. Where is the bottom? And so despite manipulation, buyers haven't come rushing in to really support the market at key support levels that we've been monitoring. So I think the crypto funds, the crypto institutional guys that were crypto rich in the last 2 to 3 years have made some great investments. They've also made some bad investments, but overall I think some of them have done well. But the guys with the real big checks to write are the traditional guys, and they're looking at the longer term investments, especially in the infrastructure pieces that Bonnie mentioned earlier.
I think that's all interesting. And kind of start to look ahead to 2019 now. Maybe stick with you, Henry. As someone who has recently incorporated a company in Mauritius, and it's looking to be compliant in other regions soon, as you talked about earlier. What are kind of the important things that governments and regulators are thinking about to attract businesses and to be blockchain friendly in 2019? From your perspective on that, what do you think regulators should be looking at moving forward?
I think regulation has been absolutely key to the growth of this market. I think in 2018, at the beginning of the year, people were already talking about security tokens. So 2018 will be the year of security tokens. Why that's not happened is, I think, a combination of lack of infrastructure to support security tokens, and actually security tokens are quite complex from a legal standing to issue legally and to think about how they're going to be exchanged on a secondary market. If they're not liquid, there's no point to create security tokens, in my opinion. They need to be liquid, and that's only going to be supported by the access to security token exchanges, regulated ones, of course. And the second component is the lack of regulation that there was in 2018 to really enable the companies to roll out their businesses. But my prediction for 2019 is that regulation is coming through. I think there will be at least 10 dominant security token exchanges in play globally by the end of 2019, potentially more, and therefore that will be the kickstart to that market. And in Singapore, for instance, the MAS has spoken about regulation for the security token market and the grounds that they want to make towards serving that market. So Singapore is certainly, in my opinion, pole position in that regard for regulation in that market. Overall, as David was mentioning, the markets from a regulatory standpoint are evolving internationally. And one of I think I mentioned this morning, one of the early trends that we've identified in the market from a regulatory standpoint is the harmonization of crypto regulation amongst Commonwealth nations. That's something to keep an eye out on, and it's perhaps one of the areas where we can expect to see crypto-related businesses expand the fastest.
Bonnie, is someone who works with companies all over the world. What do you see as kind of the best places to build a crypto or blockchain-focused business in 2019, and what kind of your thoughts on regulation for the next 12 months?
Well, one of the things we definitely start seeing the market decoupling is the fundraising securitization side versus the true technology development. So one of the things we looked at is fundraising, and in the beginning we also do see is securitizing for securitizing's sake. To us as a venture capital investor, the securitization part is not a tech innovation. It's at the most a financial streamlining process. When we looked at it, right, as restricted as US is, in terms of STO security token exchanges, we've already seen the first wave coming out, and the easiest thing is to securitize or tokenize equity. These are, you've got the early adopters like SharePost who've already processed secondary private shares over 4 billion in volume since a couple years ago, and they're just moving into the tokenization space simply to see if there's a cost reduction possibility. We see this as not much different from back in the days when VCs first standardized a lot of our early investments into things like SAFE or KISS forms, which essentially is realizing that a lot of companies can raise capital at a much cheaper cost with the development of new technology and leverage that. But at the same time, I think from the tech side, we look at blockchain, is there's still a lot of components of this train track that is not completed yet. So in essence, I think we right now see a parallel development of something getting built on it, and at the same time, the baseline is still getting developed, the foundation is still getting developed. So it'll be interesting to see how the two can, as you mentioned, Harry, harmonize in terms of timing. Because at one point in time, right now, as much as you want to look at securitizing, and whether securitizing can democratize access to certain traditionally illiquid assets like commercial real estates, the bottom chain that you're using, whether it's Ethereum or another chain that will be coming out this year, there are limitations to its functions today. So in essence, your securitization development is going to be limited by the underlying technology. And from the tech side, I think we're most curious, and we believe that in 2019, you're going to see at least 3 major competitors competing with Ethereum in terms of the level of sophistication and the level of development, specifically in the permissionless decentralized protocol side.
Those 3, do you have thoughts on what those 3 are specifically?
Ask me again next quarter.
All right, that's David, do you have thoughts on
Sure. I guess, I agree with both. Gibraltar Stock Exchange, we started out as a traditional security exchange, and we saw the advent of blockchain and blockchain technology. So we want to take it one step further, right? We want to be able to implement that technology in our traditional exchange. So we are building a new protocol specifically to address some of the questions that Bonnie raised, that Ethereum, are you able to issue security tokens properly and in a fast manner? So we don't know, and that's why, and we're not really confident, so that's why we're building our own protocol. So we are building what we call the Stacks protocol. Part of the reason why it's called the Stacks is that we want this protocol to be able to stack on top of the existing financial services industry, that it's compatible and people can run it in parallel. You can still run your business the way it is today, but then you can try to move on to this blockchain. And to give a very simple idea, this is a hybrid chain. It's permission chain and a public chain. Permission chain is because each jurisdiction, they have their own security laws. So as Gibraltar, we would be inside one permission chain. And why do we have a public chain? Because we see that hopefully there's a convergence of standards and rules across different jurisdictions. So one day, I could be in Gibraltar and I could be buying securities or tokens, say in Mauritius. So to address Henry's concern for liquidity, we definitely see liquidity as a main stumbling block, even in crypto. So if there's a public chain that can link the global liquidity in one, we see that can really be beneficial to the entire market. So this is one initiative that we're pushing towards. So my prediction for 2019, security token, and I don't see it as so enclosed that there are only going to be one winner. I think all the participants in the ecosystem already, there could be 10, 20, we all need to work together because the market is so much bigger than ICO, the security market is trillions. So I hope that all the participants, stakeholders can work together somehow. With
kind of how startups and kind of newer blockchain companies have kind of used regulatory arbitrage to have kind of shell entities in places that are easier to be Singapore or Switzerland. Where do you think the best place is to be as a blockchain company in 2019? Is Gibraltar the best place to be?
Well, obviously I have to say so. But I think, to be honest, it still has to come back to where your market is. You know, where you know, the product you're building, where do you see it happening? Right, there could be a global product, but so I guess follow the market. But Gibraltar definitely is a very, what we call it, the crypto harbor, because you know, we want to provide a regulatory certainty that, you know, no FBIs can come knocking on your door, but so, yeah. Gibraltar.
All right, there you go.
Obviously, I mean, Hong Kong is another jurisdiction that's also friendly, right? But we need to be careful with, you know, all these jurisdictions and regulation, there are minute differences, but
diplomatic second answer there. I think we all appreciate Dr. Cheung's words on Hong Kong's view of the industry earlier. Do you have something to add?
I would probably disagree slightly with David in the sense that I think there's a lot of difference, like to your point about regulatory arbitrage. I do think there is a lot of difference at the moment between crypto regulations frameworks for this industry globally. So with more consistency, it's going to be better in that regard. But you know, I think taking a step back from that, the company needs to look at where's the best jurisdiction for them, what kind of regulatory cover do they need to have. So if you're financial services, your needs are going to be very different to if you're a company that is a platform for ICOs or STOs perhaps. So that has to be taken into account. So there isn't one, you know, go-to jurisdiction in the world, I think, that is fit for all. One of the things I wanted to say though, which to maybe give a viewpoint on was, this is going back to your question from before about next year. Security tokens, I think, are going to be huge, but one thing that we have to also consider when we talk about security token market is what are types of investments that haven't really been investable in the past. So, for instance, soft assets, which sit on balance sheets of, in some cases, multinational companies, are going to actually be able to be tokenized. So I'll give you an example. Imagine a company like Disney. Disney owns hundreds, if not thousands, of highly valuable brands, which it could decide to start to tokenize a portion of the IP associated with each one of the brands that Disney owns, and start floating that on the market. So, you know, there's so many examples of ways that you can tokenize assets that have never been done before, and actually to start benefiting from some of the IP that sits on balance sheet of many companies. That's something that, from my standpoint, is extremely exciting and is a target for Fincross to look at, approaching companies and saying, look, you have these huge assets on your balance sheet, soft assets. Now let's actually think about running a fundraise on some of those. And combined with that, security token market is cool and attractive to investors who own, let's say, a lot of illiquid assets today, and who maybe, as they look to cash out of some of those investments in the future, they don't actually have to cash out purely into cash. They could actually do an asset for an asset trade, and that, I think, is something to look out for as well.
Interesting. As we look to 2019 again, and kind of the different stakeholders that are going to be playing a role in the advancement of this technology and industry, let's think about VC for a little bit first. 2018, we saw this ICO boom, and something that kind of became a talking point was that it was going to disrupt VC forever. There's a new paradigm of fundraising. Maybe it's cooled off a little bit since. Bonnie, what's your kind of take on venture capital and kind of investment in the industry 2019 and forwards? Has there been a paradigm shift, or is it kind of more of the same model?
I think from venture capital perspective, it's very much back to normal. Meaning, once again, we're looking at companies the way we looked at them. Profitability, what's your revenue streams, how are you going to monetize things? When we look at 2019, right, this is going to be the year where enterprise meets permissionless protocols. And the reason why I said that is 2017 and 18, we've seen a lot of dabbling by different enterprises into, reasonably into, first of all, the more safety zone, right? We call it the distributed ledger technology. These are essentially centralized, permissioned blockchains. It is nothing more than a distributed ledger, nothing new from the technology side, but it's a good practice ground. So we see that 2019, as many of the baseline protocols start launching into mainnet, this is going to be the year where enterprise ITs are going to start meeting and learning truthfully what can be done with true blockchain, the permissionless side. And at the same time, if you are an investor, right, I will start looking at, this is the year you're going to start seeing a lot of very smart entrepreneurs doing revenue generating businesses built on deployment services around permissionless chains. For example, what we see already happens is, in the early days, there were a lot of arguments about, hey, if all these things are open source, all the code supposedly are available on GitHub, how do you make money out of it? Well, this year, 2018, we see great examples, right? Red Hat was getting purchased by IBM for a record amount. GitHub got purchased. MuleSoft was acquired by Salesforce. So this is a demonstration that open source is helpful, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that enterprises don't need services being provided on top of these open source protocols.
Yeah, that's kind of moving kind of the stakeholder item towards corporations and enterprises. Explaining kind of your background pre-VC with some of these big enterprises. What are kind of the things that you're hearing from old colleagues or people from that world about their thoughts around permissionless blockchains instead of kind of these private blockchains that were maybe a thing in 2016 to some of these companies? Bonnie, if you want to.
Your question was with the enterprise guys right now?
Yeah, enterprises. What are you hearing from your former colleagues and associates from enterprises, their thoughts around permissionless blockchains versus private blockchains?
At the moment, they're very curious, they know nothing. And I think this is part of our job in the next 12 months, right? I think we've been very focused on a lot about connecting our companies with the enterprises because information flow, to be honest, in the last 12 months have been very difficult. Not because of lack of it, but because of the opposite. There was too much of it to the point where everybody feels like they're drowning in the space. And as we all know, when you're in certain level in an enterprise, it's not easy to seek out information by just asking everybody and letting everybody know that you might not know anything yet. So in essence, we've been working with quite a lot of enterprises on the US side to translate information to them and communicate and work with them to tell them what we are seeing honestly in terms of the performance and in terms of the developments. And this will continue into 2019, where eventually we're going to see more and more of them being able to at least absorb and understand the fundamentals. That will lead the foundations of many of these companies being able to work with the enterprises forward from 2019 to 2020, because we all know enterprise sales cycles are long. So we better start now.
Henry, do you have any thoughts around enterprise adoption, maybe from the side of kind of the banking world and things you're seeing there and people you're talking to?
Sure. I mean, from a banking side of things, private blockchains is what everyone wants to talk about. As I alluded to in my presentation this morning, I think peer-to-peer transactions in finance is going to be a huge revolution, and also it will provide wider means and access to finance for many people around the world that today are unbanked. But back to enterprise solutions, yeah, whether it's automotives, IoT companies that we've spoken to, most are still looking at and struggle to understand a permissionless blockchain solution for their specific requirements. But I think to Bonnie's point, it's an educational thing. We need to demonstrate how these solutions can be highly varied. It can be a hybrid of two solutions together depending on certain needs. It's an education piece for sure.
Your kind of counterparts, other exchanges, maybe more established kind of global exchanges. What are you kind of hearing from them? Outlook for 2019, and how do you see that exchange market kind of embracing or getting the stiff arm to blockchain in the next 12 months?
Yeah. Okay, I guess exchange, the function or the purpose of an exchange is quite clear. You know, we provide a venue for participants to transact, for the company to raise money. And so I guess going back to my earlier topic is that we want to be able to do things faster. We want to be able to attract more volume, and that the entire fundraising ecosystem can survive. So otherwise, if there's no liquidity, there's no trader, then there's no issuer, and the things sort of die off. So to keep the liquidity alive and to invite more participants, you know, one of the topics for this year has been the institutionalization of crypto. So we saw a lot of traditional institutions coming into the space. We saw this year, you know, a lot of custodian solutions. So I think this trend will continue and be part of the STO's conversation. And a lot of traditional investors, they cannot invest in something that are not listed on an exchange. So I think all these different facets will continue to grow into 2019 and help you know, drive liquidity and adoption. And obviously, there is no silver bullet for this, but you know, with the advent of technology, I think it attracts new crowd of investors who wouldn't necessarily invest it in the traditional bond or equities market. So what Henry mentioned about Disney, that idea of tokenizing an IP, that could attract millennials, right, who wouldn't buy Apple or Disney shares because it's kind of complicated to them. But if you tokenize an IP that they love, maybe that's, hey, you're attracting a new breed of investors into this market. So I think, yeah, we want to be able to play a role in that.
Thanks. Custody, which you mentioned, seems like it's been something that's holding the lack of a real custody option. It seems like it's been holding certain things back in the last year. And do you have any thoughts on custody? Do you see real solutions in 2019 there?
You know, I remember I was in the summertime in Seoul at a crypto conference there, and Mike Novogratz was speaking on behalf of Galaxy Digital, and he said, you know, custody is the roadblock for the entry of institutional money in the crypto market. I kind of agree with that statement, but I do think it's been a little bit embellished. Crypto custody is important, especially if you own millions of dollars worth of crypto. You're not going to keep it stashed on, you know, written on a piece of paper under your mattress. So you're going to want to take care of it and insure it as well. So I think insurance in the crypto custody space is going to be key. And what we're looking at Fincross is using a multi-signature solution, which basically will feature 3 private keys, and with the option to introduce a 4th private key, which we would provide to our insurance partner, so so that we can actually bring down the cost associated with crypto custody insurance. Because today insurance in this space is extremely expensive, and for some people that's enough of a turn-off to kind of stay away from it. So we think that by working with a sophisticated insurer can actually understand how the management of private keys and multi-signatories take place, by granting them access to a key that heavily reduces their risk, and they can have a better control, and therefore the price come down. That's how we see it. We think that, again, back to our solution, one of the keys of the 3 that I mentioned, we would actually give to the client. And then on the account opening process with Fincross, the client will have the choice to determine what parameters he wants to attach to the other keys. The second key would be held in our cloud server encrypted, and our third key would actually be sharded in 2, one held by a head of custody team and one by the account manager associated with that account. So the idea for us is to make it a bespoke solution that the client can actually choose the parameters associated with his account.
Just with that, Bonnie.
To me, actually, it is a bit of a bullshit to blame it on custodian as the one reason why institutional investors are not in. It could be one of it, but definitely not the only reason. If you look at the market, in reality, high-risk takers are in. Hedge funds are in. I've spoken to a lot of traditional hedge funds in New York. They're all in. Trading volumes can range from a couple $100 million a month to a couple billion. But when you look at the reason why institutional investors are not in is, if you look back at all this last couple of months, every time SEC delays the approval of ETFs, the main reason is about the exchanges. So I think it's great to see more regulated exchanges to come into the market. Because one of the things, if you looked at, I mean, even this year, right, if you have trading friends, they will surely tell you how future contracts are not really protected in the crypto world, where in the fiat world it is unheard of. So I think one of the key reasons is not just because of custodian why institutional investors are not in. I think if you're thinking of institutional investors as in pension funds, no, those guys are way, way away from coming into crypto. But the more risk-taking ones, still, I think you have to take into consideration it's not just custodian. There are a lot of other elements right now. We do need a level of regulations, whether it's a more modernized regulations or it's a copy of existing regulations. That would vary in terms of the jurisdictions. So.
Thanks. Kind of moving back towards the technology side of all this and what that's going to look like in 2019. 2018 was a lot of debate around scaling, forks because of scaling, different things around how scalable this technology really can be. 2019 Bonnie, you've already talked about it a little bit, but maybe can you expand on what you're excited about to see technology-wise advancements in 2019?
I think I've already touched upon a little bit about usage by enterprises, but in all, we looked at it as, I call it the 3 H's, right? It's the hustler, the hacker, and the hipster. We've got a lot of hackers in 2017. A lot of the teams are all very tech-oriented, all PhDs coming out of computer science in all the top universities. 2019, we're going to realize, number one is we need the hustlers, the sellers, the ones who can actually bridge the gap between the tech team and also enterprise, corporations, or even these could be late-stage startups themselves. And then the other one is hipster. Hipster is usability. I think everybody now knows, if you've ever gone and tested it out, it's horrendous in terms of how difficult it is to use and trade and move things around in the crypto world. So we're seeing a lot of movements in terms of new teams coming together, focused on the usability adoption side.
I think we're about out of time here, but one last, I'm going to get one last comment from each of you. 2019, what industry should we look at as the place where blockchain will have the biggest impact? And 12 months from now, do you see kind of the industry in a better place than it is today, or do you see a bear market kind of lasting longer than the next year? Starting with you, David.
I think in terms of industry, blockchain is a ledger, right? I think the financial industry is still where you see the most application. And in terms of my outlook for 2019, I think last year, one thing we heard over and over is how quickly crypto or blockchain is evolving, is happening. So hopefully this winter will not last that long because everything is moving so fast. So.
I agree totally with Dave.